Hello, and welcome to the Cluebird. I'm your host, R. Wayne Browne, and I'm also the author of the book, The Cluebird. Well, today I would like to discuss with you why the Cluebird matters. And I hear you suddenly wrestling around in your chair. Well, hey, I hear you. So take a moment and hear me out. First, I believe the Cluebird is our unconscious mind. I ultimately came to believe this because my dealings with the Cluebird have often come up when I was under duress. Sometimes a lot of duress. For example, when I'm faced with a serious dilemma, or I need to make a choice on an urgent matter, or when I'm just needing a quick yes or no answer to an urgent problem. That's duress. And we need all the help we can get to get out of our many problems in life. I think as part of our survival instincts, we have both a conscious and a subconscious mind. We deal with many things every day using our conscious minds. It's wonderful and helps us throughout our lives. However, when we're confronted with a serious issue that may prove harmful to us or others, that must be dealt with. I think our subconscious minds might just somehow bend the rules momentarily and sneak over to our conscious awareness side, offering up some really smart or sage-like advice at precisely the perfect time to help us out. I think it's all about helping us survive. For example, we're out sailing with a small group of friends, and somehow one of them unexpectedly falls out of the boat. The bay water is about 65 degrees, and you know time is of the essence. You know many people have perished in this exact situation. Then, somewhere out of the nothingness, you immediately toss a life preserver at your friend and command him to hang on to it. Next, you tell someone else to constantly point at that life preserver so we don't lose sight of him. Then you continue on for just what feels about right, and then you turn the boat into the wind and point to the life preserver. You pin your friend up against the hull of the boat, and several of you pull him aboard and begin wrapping him in blankets for warmth as you instinctively head for home. On the way in, you're amazed at yourself for how brilliantly you just performed and possibly saved your friend's life. You feel amazingly grateful. Where did all of this information come from? And at the perfect time, you quietly ask yourself, oh, sure, you've trained for this, but when the real thing shows up at your door, how will you really do? You never know until you experience the real thing. Here you are practicing rescue recovery techniques with your dear friend, and for real. How did it turn out? Wow, you joyfully think. So under duress, I believe the Cluebird offers up life-saving advice. You heard it or felt it, or it came to you as a hunch or a sudden knowing. But you somehow got the advice you desperately needed at the perfect time. You then accepted the advice and performed flawlessly. No questions, Zoom calls, or group discussions. No, you just did it. That's called self-leadership. We would all agree we can train for a recovery of a passenger from a boat, a car wreck, or even a house fire. We can think about all the things we would magically do to save ourselves and others, or even personal property in these situations. We feel comfortable knowing we have thought it out, and we feel prepared to handle any such emergency. However, I know from hours of training on emergency procedures in fighter jets, when the real thing finally shows up at your door, it just feels different. It feels different than when we were just training for such an event. Ask any infantry soldier the difference between a dry fire exercise, rubber bullets, and the real thing. It's different. I have memories of many times confronting an emergency situation, running the checklist, following my training, and yet I often felt a sudden hunch about how things might work out. I would often get a serious clarity of thought, or things would feel like it all slowed down for a moment as I got a sudden new insight. I would execute the series of events flawlessly, and I would kid about it later with friends and fellow pilots. And I would always realize a subtle difference between training for something versus when you really experience the real thing, when you have to perform for keeps. When the clue bird or your unconscious mind offers up sage-like advice at the perfect time, you accept it. You hear it, and you tap into it. This advice can save you and others. You must feel like you are all in. It's 100%. So, listening to your clue bird can change your life and the lives of others. Firemen, soldiers, athletes, you name it. They all respond in some way to their clue bird's advice, either knowingly or unknowingly. The three things that make the clue bird a powerful idea. 1. The advice comes in many ways. It can be a voice. Yes, you just heard something, yet curiously, there is no one around you. You clearly heard it. You heard that voice anyway, and you accept and react accordingly. This has happened to me on many occasions. Another example, you have worked on a project for many days, and you just can't get it figured out. Then one day, you sit down, and looking at it one more time, just like you did yesterday, a new insight suddenly comes at you out of the blue. You had never thought of that before, yet it works. It solves the problems. You might for a moment think you are suddenly a genius. Hey, give it up. You don't question it or call for your best friend. You just do it and you move on feeling grateful. The clue bird's advice is always for you to do something. It's on you to perform. Another example might be a hunch. You're under duress and you're very frustrated. Then suddenly you have a hunch and you know what to do. For example, you're looking for your lost pet in a snowstorm and you have searched for hours. Hey, it's getting dark and you know everything's going to change. Well, suddenly out of nowhere, you get a hunch to check out that old abandoned barn. And you surprisingly and gratefully, hey, you find your pet. Getting a hunch or a sudden insight as to what to do is no time for a question or a debate. The clue bird's advice is for you to perform, and you can't hide. It's time for you to man up and do something without hesitation, with confidence, with a certain knowing. What's it going to be? And the last part calls for self-leadership. Whether you are fighting a fire, a soldier in a firefight, landing a crippled fighter jet, it's time to act. You lead yourself by solving your problem. You just got great advice at the perfect time from the clue bird, and it's now time for you to perform confidently. Work the plan without hesitation. Whether it's successfully rescuing your friend from the cold, wet bay, recovering a stricken jet, or making a brilliant call in a firefight, it was up to you to perform. Self-leadership, confidently doing what you suddenly know to do. It's not about where the advice came from. It's all about performing and turning that advice into reality. Yeah, you can say that these people would have or could have done all of these things without the clue bird's advice. Yes, that's true. But I would rather work myself out of a moment of serious duress with some sage-like advice than just winging it and hoping for the best. Listening can change your life. Doing will change your life. Practice self-leadership. I want to thank you for tuning in today. I hope that our discussion was meaningful and insightful for you. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe. Hot tip. Hey, until our next visit, I would like for you to consider the meaning of embrace the struggle. What does that mean to you?